Hey now, welcome to 3x5 with Steve Bennett. My name is Steve Bennett. Episode 7. Episodes flying by, one a week. Every Tuesday they go up. The North-South Connection YouTube page, check them out there. Today we have a very special Italian-American episode. I've been knee-deep in my culture the last few weeks. I did an impassioned one last thing on the Sportscasters about becoming Italian-American. I went to the Italian Festival here in Buffalo and ate zeppoli and pizzelles and Italian sausage and fried ravioli and gorged myself in culture. And then I watched a movie, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and it inspired me to write this Italian-American episode. So we're going to do it 3 lists as always, 1 in sports, 1 in pop culture, and 1 in wrestling. Let's kick it off. We're going to start with the pop culture list, sponsored by the North-South Connection, the people nice enough to have us on their YouTube page. And we'll start off with the top 5 Italian-American movie. All right, number 5. This is the movie I was talking about that I just watched. It Ain't Over. Maybe the best documentary I've ever seen in my life about the story of Yogi Berra, whose granddaughter was watching the 2015 All-Star game with him. And they had announced the top 4 living legends of baseball and had them on the field. And Yogi wasn't among the 4. And she turned to him and said, "Are you dead?" And the theme of the movie kind of is that everyone thinks of Yogi Berra as this clown who said those funny things, like it ain't over until it's over. Or it's, you know, all the other ones that he said, all those weird quotes, the Yogiisms, as they call them in the movie. But the reality is he's one of the best baseball players of all time. He won 10 World Series as a player, 3 more as a coach, 13 World Series total. He won 3 MVPs. There's this stretch in the 50s where he was no worse than 4th in MVP voting. Really an unbelievable player and an unbelievable Italian-American who stormed the beach at Normandy in World War II, didn't file his Purple Heart paperwork because he was afraid his mother would get upset and be worried about him, and was eventually, finally, by Barack Obama, after his death, given the highest civilian honor that a president can give, which is an interesting story in the documentary. Among itself. There's a lot of Italian-American movies, a lot of great ones, like The Bronx Tale probably would have been here if not for the fact that I just watched this yesterday. But it's maybe the best documentary I've ever seen, so I wanted to give it a spot. That's number 5. Number 4, the best comedy on the list, a classic, My Cousin Vinnie. I got a story about it. I think I was about 11 or 12 years old when this came out, and I was seeing the commercials, and I really wanted to see it. So one day in the summertime, I just got on my bike and pedaled about 4 miles to the movie theater at the mall closest to my house, across this really busy street. And it was rated R, so I bought a ticket to another movie that was rated PG, and then went to see My Cousin Vinnie and rode my bike home. And my parents never had any idea I went until like a few years ago when I told them. But a very quotable movie. Very memorable. Joe Pesci's great in it. Marissa Tomei is beautiful in it. Herman Munster has one of his best roles near the end of his life. Really a great Italian-American story. Ralph Macchio from Karate Kid is in it as well. And a great ending, feel-good story. Love this movie. Could even been higher, probably. Number 3, and it's a lot of movies in one. It's Rocky. And Rocky 1, and Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, not so much 5. Definitely the first 4. The Italian Stallion, there he is, Rocky Balboa. Such a great fictional athlete that there's a statue of him in Philadelphia. Best picture in 1978, I believe, something like that. Late 70s. And, Stallone wrote this movie and got it produced and made. And Hulk Hogan was in Rocky 3, Mr. T's in Rocky 3, Ivan Drago in Rocky 4, Apollo Creed, of course, in 1 and 2. It's a great story, great stuff all the way through. I recently watched a movie that could have been on the list that my cousin, Everybody Loves Raymond, made. I can't think of the name of the movie, but it's a new one that he made, and the guy quotes Rocky throughout the whole movie. It's really good. If I knew the name, I'd tell you to watch it, but just look up the latest movie that Ray Romano's in, and you can find it that way. Number 2, maybe my favorite movie, maybe my second favorite movie, very high up there. Martin Scorsese, who could have had 5 movies on this list, of course, and that is Goodfellas. What do you say about Goodfellas, right? Just a masterpiece in every way. De Niro, Pesci, Ray Liotta, just unbelievably done. I've watched, if it's on, I watch it. You know, I've watched this movie hundreds of times. This is the story of Henry Hill, as told by Henry Hill. And Henry Hill, later in life, became a regular guest on the Howard Stern show, and one time even got drunk and got in a car and was driving around with the e-cameras trying to show Howard where the bodies were. Sometimes he would admit to murder, sometimes he wouldn't. Kind of a wild guy. Ray Liotta's life is also, not Ray Liotta, Henry Hill's life is also detailed in a Steve Martin movie, which, of course, I can't remember the name of again. It's something blue something. Everyone's probably screaming at the film, but Henry Hill, an interesting guy, 2 movies made after him. He just passed away a few years ago. But Goodfellas is, of course, the main movie, with a very, very great job by Martin Scorsese's mother, who plays Joe Pesci's mother in the movie, which is one of my favorite scenes when they're eating dinner. And Pesci tells her, she asks why he doesn't find a good girl. He says, I find one almost every night. But I love Goodfellas. Martin Scorsese also has a short documentary that's on Max right now. And I believe it's called Italian American. And if you check that out, it's just him interviewing his parents and them talking about coming to the United States and their life as Italian Americans. And his mother's really the star of it. And it's really great. It's only like a half an hour long, but it's definitely worth watching. And I know it's on Max right now. As for number 1, come on. Godfather 1, Godfather 2, the 2 greatest movies potentially of all time. They're both in the top 5 in the AFI countdowns, and I think we got a picture of it here. Ryan's going to show us. There's the Godfather right there. Again, I don't have a lot to say about the Godfather other than it's great. One of my favorite things, again, a Howard Stern thing, Artie Lang could quote this movie pretty much verbatim. And when James Caan was on, they went back and forth and did a scene, which was really great. But, you know, he's going to make you an offer he can't refuse. It's iconic. It's a cinematic classic. And although some Italian Americans are sensitive that many Italian American stories depict Italian Americans as mobsters and things like that, the fact is it's classic American cinema. This is classic American cinema right now. This is the cream of the crop. This is one of the best movies ever made by almost any metric. And it's an Italian American story made by Italian Americans and acted by many Italian Americans. So it's hard to ignore. There's no other movie that could have been number 1. So the top 5 Italian American movies, we have It Ain't Over, My Cousin Vinnie, Rocky, Goodfellas, and The Godfather. Just missed were Moonstruck and A Bronx Tale. I really wanted both on, especially Moonstruck, but there's only 5 spots. And as you'll see in the next list, sometimes there's just too many. So that's the top 5 movies. All right, moving on. Number 2, this is sponsored by the Sportscasters Podcast. Shout out to the very first guest ever on the Sportscasters Podcast, Jeff Passan, who had an accident at his house in Cincinnati and broke his back. Speedy recovery to Jeff. Hope you feel better, buddy. The top 5 Italian American athletes, and this is one I didn't know. There's 150, 200 people who could have been on this top 5 list. It was very difficult, but let's see how I did. Let's start with number 5. All right, Mike Piazza, one of the best catchers of all time. He actually has the most home runs by a catcher ever. Was picked very late in the draft by the Dodgers, really only as a favor by Tommy Lasorda to his father. He ends up becoming one of the great catchers of all time, signs a huge contract with the Mets, hits one of the most iconic home runs in baseball history in the first game after 9/11, the first live sporting event in New York. He hits a home run. He also went on to own a soccer team in Serie B in Italy, and was most recently the coach of the Italian team in the World Baseball Classic, who made sort of a Cinderella run into the knockouts, a really fun team that had Italians and Italian Americans everywhere cheering for them. Mike Piazza gets the spot at number 5. Number 4, the before mentioned Yankee great Yogi Berra, number 8. Yogi Berra, number 8. Yogi Berra. 3 MVPs, 13 World Series, 10 as a player, World War II veteran. Would have been a Purple Heart recipient, but he wouldn't fill out the paperwork because he didn't want to upset his mother. This is really the American dream, the Italian-American experience. You know, his parents came over from Italy. They had no money. They were in poverty. His brothers had to work as soon as they were old enough to. And finally, the older brother said, we got to give Yogi the chance to be this guy, to be a pro baseball player. And his father agreed if he'd send some money home. And he famously tried out for the Cardinals. And the GM of the Cardinals didn't sign him because he gave his neighbor $500 and wanted to give Yogi $250. Yogi wouldn't take the $250, but the general manager had a plan in mind. He was going to go to Brooklyn and then sign Yogi for Brooklyn, what he wanted to do, but the Yankees got him instead. $500, not bad. 3-time MVP, 10-time World Series winner. That was a nice investment by the Yanks. Number 3, multiple Super Bowl MVP, Joe Montana. There he is, of course, led 2 game-winning Super Bowl drives in the fourth quarter, both against the Bengals. Also the quarterback who threw the pass that resulted in the catch. What else? Killed the Broncos in the Super Bowl in the Louisiana Superdome, NFL Hall of Fame. And until Tom Brady kind of took the throne, this is the guy who was kind of the unanimous NFL GOAT for years. When anyone said who was the best player in NFL history, you said Joe Montana, undefeated in the playoffs. Really an unbelievable player and proud Italian-American, member of the Italian-American Sports Hall of Fame as well as the NFL Hall of Fame. Number 2, whenever I hear this guy's name, I think of the guys in the barbershop in Coming to America. Rocky Marciano, from Massachusetts, Italian-American, 49-0. Never lost a boxing match. Heavyweight champion of the world, Rocky Marciano. Had to have him on the list. The Italian Stallion, the original, right? What a boxer. What a man. 49-0. Had to have him. And we have him at number 2. Who could be number 1 if you got this guy at number 2? And, of course, it's the late, great Joe DiMaggio, the Yankee Clipper, married to Marilyn Monroe, which made him cross over, one of the early sports stars, kind of cross over into pop culture. He was on the cover of Life. One of the best players of all time, the great hit streak, just an amazing Yankee, an amazing Italian-American, someone they sing about him in songs, right? Like Joe DiMaggio's name is in songs. And, he lived a tough life sometimes, tortured life at times. Many say he sort of died when Marilyn died. Loved Marilyn so much, but she wasn't as good to him. Just a really great story, and one of the greatest baseball players of all time, and a great Italian-American. His brother was a Major League Baseball player as well, another member of the Italian-American Sports Hall of Fame. And it was really tough to make this list. I got a bunch of honorable mentions. Dan Marino could have been on the list. Tony and Phil Esposito could have been on the list. Barry Zito, Mario Andretti, Lou Ferrigno, the Bosa brothers, Jennifer Capriati, Joe Torre, John Smoltz, just to name a few, Phil Mickelson. All these people are in the Italian-American Sports Hall of Fame. And I know Yankee fans who had 2 players on the list are going to hope that Volpe is going to be the next guy to follow in line as one of the great American ball players, as it doesn't seem like Anthony Rizzo is going to get there anytime soon. So there it is, the top 5 Italian-American athletes. Piazza at 5, Yogi at 4, Joe Montana at 3, Rocky Marciano at 2, and Joe DiMaggio at 1. All right, last list today. The wrestling list. 24-inch podcast sponsors that one. Shout out to a vacationing Hollywood Dave Rowlands, enjoying life on the Jersey Shore with all the other Italian-Americans down there in New Jersey. And today we have the top 5 Italian-American wrestlers. And it's a list of legends here for sure. Again, many of these people, if not all of them, maybe all of them, are in the Italian-American Sports Hall of Fame. Let's start with number 5, Gorilla Monsoon. There he is there in his Italian singlet. His original gimmick was an Italian wrestling gimmick before he switched to Gorilla Monsoon. But Bob was a proud Italian American, grew up in Rochester, New York, just down the street from me, and one of the great, obviously, wrestling announcers of all time, a Hall of Famer, in and out of the ring. Number 5, Gorilla Monsoon or Bob Morella. Number 4, I know my producer Ryan has him high on his list of favorites. Captain Lou Albano. There's Captain Lou there, an Italian-American icon. Of course, is in the original Super Mario Brothers movie. This guy looks, I mean, he's a nut. There's no doubt about it. He's a nut, but a good nut and a proud Italian, and someone who, again, was able to cross over from wrestling into pop culture. He was in the Cyndi Lauper videos, and someone that people outside of wrestling certainly knew even before it was common for people outside of wrestling to know you. The next 3 are all-time greats. Trust me. Let's start with number 3. The Macho Man Randy Savage, the son of an Italian immigrant. His father, of course, came from the Boot, and he settled in Illinois, where there's many Italian Americans as well. His family did in Downers Grove, Illinois, I believe. And the Macho Man is one of those people in the Italian American Sports Hall of Fame, a Hall of Fame he agreed to go into before he passed away, unlike the wrestling one. But the Macho Man was a great Italian American. Here we got him at number 3 on my list. Number 2, Terry Bollea, Hulk Hogan. There's Terry. Again, the son of an Italian American immigrant. First generation, Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, both first generation Italian Americans, meaning their parents were whoever, like their fathers in these cases were from Italy. Hulk, born here, of course, Italian American, first generation. I'm actually second generation Italian American, because my grandmother was from Italy and my grandfather. My mother was first generation Italian American. Hulk, of course, what can you say about Hulk? I think the most interesting thing is if Hulk isn't number 1, who is number 1? And I left the number 1 spot for an Italian, someone born in the mountains of Abruzzo in Italy, east of Rome. Used to hide in the mountains from the Nazis, but was tough enough to run into town and get food for everyone else hiding in the mountains. Eventually came and settled in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he became a world champion and one of the people who've sold out Madison Square Garden more than anyone in the world in any era. The late, great Bruno San Martino. There he is, the Italian strongman. Bruno, a hero who literally protected his family and his friends from his village in Abruzzo, and became, like I said, lived the American dream. This is another example of it. You know, a great Italian who comes over. I know when he came over, he got picked on a lot. He didn't speak the language. He didn't know the language. He had a tough time assimilating, as many Italians did. But he got into weightlifting and into wrestling, and he became one of the all-time greats. You know, a star in a business of stars. A no-brainer for number 1 on this list. You know, I think every Italian American owes Bruno San Martino their respect for sure. And I was at the Italian Fest this weekend, and there's an immigration exhibit, Italian immigrant exhibit, and they had a picture of Bruno there. So his impact is felt to this day, even at the Italian Fest in Buffalo, New York. But one of the great wrestlers, held the championship belt for years and years and years. 2 great runs, both multiple years long. Worked for Vince Sr. for a long time. Came back as a announcer on Superstars in the 80s. A man of principle. You know, it took him many years to get him into the Hall of Fame because he felt like Vince McMahon had treated him unfairly in some way. And but I think we have to thank Triple H for kind of ending that Cold War and getting Bruno into the Hall of Fame where he deserves before he passed away in Pittsburgh, you know, later in his life. So that's the top 5 wrestling list there. There's many others as well, just like all the lists. But we had Gorilla at 5, Captain Lou at 4, Randy Savage at 3, Hulk Hogan at 2, and the Italian strongman Bruno San Martino at 1. All right, so just like that, it's another episode of 3x5 in the books. As always, of course, I want to thank everyone for watching. Don't forget, it's every Tuesday. They go up 10 o'clock a.m. You can find them at the North-South Connection YouTube page. Shout out to Justin and Aaron and Chad and Ryan and everyone at North-South Connection for having me. Also, don't forget to check out the Sportscasters, the 24-inch podcast. For more information, you can jump on my Twitter at sports_casters. We'll be back here next Tuesday with another list. Until then, Forza Azzurri. I'm out.